Today on Locked On Suns, why Devin Booker's second All-NBA season in 2023-24 was both maybe his best ever and a step back. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to kick off your week. Happy Monday. Welcome to the show. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. So wherever you're finding us, hit follow or subscribe. Get a show in your feed. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer. Get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all off season long as the news keeps rolling in. We got a lot to talk about. Devin Booker's season. That's plenty right there. And it was both his best and a step back in a variety of ways. Today's episode is brought to you by the LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. So to get through the stats, the production that Book put together this past season. All right. Obviously, third-team All-NBA, his second appearance on an All-NBA team, his third voted-in All-Star appearance, his fourth overall, and the numbers were flawless, basically. Really hard to poke a hole in. Highest true shooting percentage of his career since 2019-20, but pretty much tied with that season. Highest assist rate of his career. Second lowest turnover rate of his career. Obviously, the Suns win, 49 games, all said and done. And, I mean, he had the 63-point game. He had brilliant individual moments. And yet, I feel like you can zoom out a little bit, and a 62-point game, and still feel some questions about it. And the reason is, every year up until this season, for Booker's entire prime, and I'm going the past 6 years, that's probably even longer than what you would call his prime, I would have, and I did this show, and could have, and did, point to not only production and different win totals and making the finals and everything else, but I also would have been able to tell you Booker improved at this specific thing. And yeah, he's 27. At some point, it's probably unfair to hold him to that standard of you need to get better every season in a huge way, but it doesn't even have to be a huge way. I very much struggle to look at this past season for Devin Booker and feel like not only that he improved and got better, but that he met the moment of what was being put on his plate, right? Honestly, it might be unfair, but none of the numbers I just listed off for this past season, even if you can make a case it was his best statistical season ever, were so far and away greater than anything he's ever done. So even if I say that, I don't think that's where the bar should be. Going into the season, I said multiple times, many times, not only does Booker need to be the point guard for this team, he also needs to be, a 3-level scoring threat. He needs to be, kind of take over control of kind of what's being run and what pace things are being run at. And obviously, somewhat of a presence. We'll get into the leadership. I don't want to fully use that word, but take on the responsibility of being the clear-cut cornerstone now that Chris Paul is gone and even Monty Williams is gone and some of the other glue guys like Mikal Bridges and, whoever else you want to point to, they're gone as well. And he probably needs to be one of their best point-of-attack defenders. He didn't do a lot of those things, And so that's where I come in. 2018-19, to go through what these improvements were, to prove that this was an aberration this year, to have him not add new elements to his game. 2018-19, played point guard pretty much entirely. Crazy production that season. Just as a reminder of what that production was, he was at a grand total of 26.6 points per game, which if you remember, he averaged that exact number twice, but that was a career high for him. It would continue to be a career high for the next 4 seasons. So he just put up numbers that year playing point guard and really started to prove that his talent was even more legit than we already knew. 2019-20, he coexists. They bring Ricky Rubio in. He doesn't even really take a back seat. His usage is still really high. His assist rate's still really high. Those two guys played off of each other so beautifully, but they also play faster. They're, of course, winning, so that is another tick mark for him of, hey, I'm not just doing this on a bad team. I can really contribute efficiently and productively and, pick my spots and win basketball games. The next season, of course, he goes back off ball because Chris Paul comes back in. He improves on defense. He hits that stride with his pull-up three-pointer, I think you would have to say, in the playoffs against the closeout game against the Lakers and a couple other big moments. The season after that, he's really, in hindsight, had probably a better MVP case than he did in real time. Best player on the best team. Jokic wins it, whatever, but Book had nightly consistency, fire on both ends. He was really the spirit and kind of heart of that team, even though Mikal and Chris and all those other guys I mentioned were still around. And he made his three into a consistent weapon again during that 64-win franchise best season. 38% from deep. His attempts went up. That was, to me, his best season. I think I would still pick that as his best season. Last year, scoring feel. It was just the timing and the patience and the feel that I talked about so much. He just had the defense in the palm of his hand, it felt like, so often, and it, maybe didn't show up in the numbers to quite the same degree. His 3-point total takes a dip. It is the best 2-point shooting season of his career, so maybe that's where you would say that it really it broke through in terms of that feel. But of course, then he also coexists next to KD, and really in the playoffs obviously showed us something that had us all wondering what more there could be, even on top of all of that, in the postseason when he is on the ball playing basically point guard, when Chris kind of, was starting to break down permanently, more so even than he had in the past, and Book's defense just felt like, wow, is this really going to be something, another element to his game? This past year, I don't have an answer there. I don't have an answer there. Free throw attempts, pretty similar. Assists, it's like, okay, yeah, to have a high assist total on a winning team, that's something. And to keep the turnovers low, okay, like maybe you would say it's the best playmaking season of his career. There is something to be said for that, but I think if we're being honest, that was a lot about opportunity more so than, to me, feeling like he really, really took a step forward in that. His defense, I don't think you would say it translated from that postseason over. It's not really anything. So maybe this is just what Book is, and some of the other stuff that's a little more big picture will improve, and this is still a pretty damn good player. He's an all-NBA guy. That's great. If you have a third-team All-NBA player and a second-team All-NBA player, which KD was this season, odds are you're going to have a chance to go pretty far in the playoffs if you can put together a supporting cast that's, good enough, which this one wasn't. So maybe that's it. Maybe there is no more improvement to be there. But again, I'm not just making up that benchmark and measurement for him. Oh, you have to get better every year. The team had an expectation that Devin Booker would get better this year and handle new responsibilities, new ingredients to what he was going to have to do to lead this team. And he did not rise to that level to the degree that I think he needed to. He's not the reason that they underperformed. He's probably not even the biggest reason they underperformed. I just said the supporting cast would definitely be higher on that list. Bradley Beal's season, who we talked about on Friday with Steven, would be higher on that list. But I do think it's fair to say that despite Book being incredible and getting the accolades and the production and the numbers that he earned with his play, that doesn't tell the full story. This was not his best season. And I do think there's some places that he took a step back that he's going to need to get back to normal with coming up this fall if the Suns are going to get where they want to go. Let's break down what those areas were and how hopeful I am that return to form can come. And then some. Coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, the best place to post a job, the best place to find a job, the best place to get a job. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals who are right for the role, which is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have so many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Told you before, I'll tell you again, LinkedIn is why I have the job I have today. I was kind of looking around, poking around, spending some time on LinkedIn, just maybe hoping something fell into my lap. And lo and behold, it did. A job writing about sports media, a topic I'm passionate about, a topic I had experience writing about, and enough experience that I was the right level of experience for the company. I found the qualifications, found the benefits and pay and all that stuff to know, hey, yeah, I'm probably the right fit here. And then I went ahead, applied, got an interview, got the job, all thanks to LinkedIn. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Join them, post your job for free. And link at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's keep the show rolling here. So, a few areas where Book took a step back. And let's get those out of the way because it's the part that I think is the most fixable, okay? Defensive execution and impact. All right, I think his communication, I've said this throughout the season, talked about it with Steven plenty of times. If you watch, even on plays where the Suns did not get stops or looked a little bit broken on the defensive end of the floor, Book was really that quarterback on that side. You can tell that he embraced that role and that leadership role and that presence. He was pointing, he was talking, he was, even in media situations, kind of taking ownership and accountability for all of that stuff. And that's important. But off ball especially, his execution and his impact regressed. He got beat on backdoor cuts a lot of the time. And not even always cuts. Like, not a lot of teams don't cut anymore. But even a little bit of the three-point shooters in the corner. Now they're a little more toward the wing. That half step that Book falls behind the play is the difference between a contested corner three with Book recovering back out there to suddenly he loses track. He's not able to get a hand in that player's face. It's an open three. Little things like that, and just sort of some rotation stuff, some switching. I wouldn't say ever that he was the biggest problem, but some of the bad habits cropped up, and he wasn't at the high levels we have seen from 2021 to 2023, where he was a positive on that end, and you never really had to worry. Also, the fact that they didn't trust him to or ask him to guard on the ball much at all against the best players that they went up against. I'm not going to hold that against him. That at the end of the day, that is a coaching staff decision, but it's hard to give him a lot of credit and feel good about it, given that he never got to the point where the coaching staff was asking him to do that. We only can judge what happens on the court, and I'm not saying he can never do it again, but I'm not going to give him credit for it this season because it wasn't a big part of what he had to do. The other thing I think can improve, big picture, is the weird possessions where it felt like a computer was crashing or your phone was freezing up or some sort of malfunction was going on where he's just dribbling the life out of the ball, air out of the ball, and just sort of sitting there overthinking. That's not Book. Book thinks the game at a really high level. Any players who know that better than me will have always said that about him. You watch him long enough, it's very obvious that he just understands how to get to his spots, what the right decision to make is. Even that defensive communication is illustrating that he obviously is a very smart basketball player. I don't think that just because those possessions were more frequent this season that suddenly he forgot how to be a great offensive player. But something went wrong. I think in general, he can put that behind him, but the elements, the ingredients, the microscopic little parts of what added up to him having those moments, I got to admit I'm a little more worried about. And they are part of why he did not meet the expectations that I think a lot of us and clearly the front office and coaching staff had for him this past season to shoulder everything he was asked to shoulder. Pace. The Suns finished the regular season 17th in offensive seconds per possession, which is a better metric than pace because it's just the offensive end. When the Suns had the ball, how much time were they using? They were 17th in that category. And in the playoffs, I would want to tell you they were even lower. No, they had I've actually looked this up. It's hilarious. They had the fastest pace in the NBA in the postseason this year, and they had the highest number of their shots that came at the rim as a portion of their total. Their at rim frequency was higher. So maybe they turned the page. Maybe they figured it out, or that series was just kind of so all over the place and they were more desperate. I don't know. Fourth quarters, of course, turnovers. Booker's turnovers, of course, I mentioned in that first segment, stayed relatively equivalent and plateaued at a good, really low point, but the team turnovers were really high. I'm not going to put that all on him, but again, the idea was that he was going to be their point guard this year for the most part, and so the overall team efficiency and decision-making as an offensive unit, you kind of have to place that on his shoulders a bit. And just broken possessions, right? Just times where set aside, it might not have been a turnover. Maybe they actually got into their set quickly. Maybe there was no computer malfunction, but it ended up with the type of process, the type of shot that they did not want. Too much iso ball, too much, pull-up mid-range jumpers, stagnant offense. Even if stagnant meaning little ball movement, even if the pace as far as the offensive seconds per possession type stat that I just told you was high, it didn't really look right. I put that on him too. So does that mean that he can't be a point guard? Does that mean they need to take the ball out of his hands? I know a lot of you want a point guard. I'm not opposed to it in a vacuum. I think it could help in some respects. But this comes back to what I've said all the time. And talked about it with Steven right after the season ended. A lot of teams, it's natural, it's normal, I get it. It's a lot easier. It feels like that's what you do in sports, to talk about adding things, changing things, making this trade, making this acquisition. When your team falls short, when your team's plan in October doesn't come together by June. A lot of why the Suns will be better next season, if they're better next season, is their best players fitting together better, playing off of one another better, and just being better, being healthier too, of course. And it's hard for me to imagine a season maybe more consistent for KD would be the only nit you would pick. But it's hard for me to imagine a season better for Durant than he just had. When you talk about the volume, the minutes, the two-way play, he was available. He was relatively consistent. He was really effective on both ends. I don't think it's fair to ask KD at this point in his career to be even better than he just was. I think getting that again, you feel pretty great, and I believe he can do it. The guy who can get better, of course, Beal, more consistent and healthy, available, all that. Talked on Friday's show about ways that they can use him better and have him be himself more rather than being uncomfortable, which I think he was. But if Booker can check more of the boxes that are being drawn for him to check next season, that's the best path for the Suns being better as a team. We've seen him do all of it. It's a lot to ask, but he's kind of got to. And that's what prevents me from sitting here and saying he just had his best season. It's headed in the right direction. He had a great season. But if the Suns are going to pull this off, he's going to need to be amazing. And he wasn't quite amazing this past season. Let's go off the court to close out the show. A lot went wrong there for the Suns. How much of fixing that has to fall on Book? What's fair to ask of him there? Break that down next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. Love eBay Motors. Told you about them a million times. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof rack, exhaust kits, those are their examples. Mine is a wheel cover, interior sunshade flap to block the sun from coming in my eyes. I believe I've gotten a long time ago. I got a rear view mirror, like the driver and passenger side front door, because I smashed it on the way to pulling out of my driveway. With over 122 million parts, those are just some of them. For your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need, the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's close out the show. So, every team has to deal with this looming kind of hard to pin down, hard to measure, hard to evaluate idea of leadership every season. I mean, not even just sports, of course. There's people who make a living doing talks and seminars and this and that about leadership. I truly don't believe when it comes to the NBA, which is the leadership that maybe I have observed the most and probably the only one I would ever pretend to have anything to say about. I don't believe it has to come from the best player. I don't. I really don't, because I think there's teams where it comes from the coach. There's teams where the identity, the personality, the leadership, the sort of do as I do person, a lot of the time that's the coach. I think Miami is a good example of that. I think, what's another good example of that? The Clippers. I don't think any of their guys, they're not a championship team, so do with that what you will, but very good. They've been good for 5 years. You can go on and on down the list. I think there's times when one of the best players, but maybe not the certified top guy, can be a leader on their team. I think, what's an example of that? I think Kyrie Irving's been clearly one of the main leaders of that Dallas team, and he's the second best guy, but he's a pretty new entrant to that organization and just kind of hit his stride, landed and made his impression felt. I think in Boston, probably Al Horford feels like that, and Marcus Smart was kind of that at one point. Even Marcus Morris, I felt like maybe at one point, those guys were younger back then, but so that can be kind of what it is. That said, I don't blame Booker for Frank Vogel not working. I don't blame Booker for not, you could say, oh, well, yes, the role players they signed, the minimum guys, those mid-prime veterans, as James Jones always called them, didn't work out. Well, aren't star players supposed to make their teammates better? I'm not going to go that far. Those were unproven players, and they got ample opportunity and couldn't make the most of it. I'm not going to pin that on Booker or Durant or Beal or Vogel, frankly. That was those guys' fault. They're not maybe good enough players at this point. So I don't think that stuff's his fault. I don't know if the, waxing and waning of their performance and their effort and all that was his fault. I mean, he deserves some of the blame, but all of it, I don't know. Is he going to be the sole reason, okay, he had this epiphany over the summer and now those problems are gone? Probably not. But it is part of his job to make players better and make the most of a situation as the clear-cut kind of cornerstone of the franchise and the highest paid guy on the team. He is in his prime. He's youngest. He's under contract for longest. He's supposed to be the best player. He can't be part of the problem, and he has to be part of the solution. And part of why I'm not, I guess, part of why I'm holding him to that standard and putting that on him, even though there's plenty of players in the NBA who I wouldn't even bother with, I would treat it as a lost cause, is that Booker can really be that rising tide and be a galvanizing presence for his teams. We've seen it before, and he does it with his play more than anyone on the team, previous or current. I mean, maybe you would say McHale or Campaign, I guess, but there is also a certain level of okay, the energy guy is not going to be the leader of the team. Those are different. Campaign made everybody feel really good when he would get going, but nobody would have ever called Campaign the leader of the team, right? Similar, right now it's like Grayson Allen can have some cool moments and really get hot and, flip a game with his shooting, and he, plays hard, and he's not the leader of the team. Book can do both. Book is good enough, and he is veteran enough, experienced enough now, and he has that spirit, that edge, that fire that, again, wasn't really there often enough this year, but we have seen it. I mentioned it in the first segment as part of what he brought to the table in that 64-win 2021-22 season that I do credit him for developing over time, which was that fire. If you remember that season, he really kind of, to me, turned a corner, and maybe he's unturned that corner a little bit here and there since, but he channeled the problems and the barking and the chirping at the refs that had always kind of gotten in the way for him, and sort of the MVP narrative and a lot of that stuff, and he really just said, F it. If I'm MVP, I'm MVP, I don't care. If the refs aren't on my side, I'm going to make them be on my side. I'm going to get downhill. I have the talent. I'm just going to get after it. And there was the Minnesota game when Russell was still there and Towns, obviously, and he took it to those guys, and he's barking at the people on the in the floor seats. And there was that game, I think, against the Clippers where they put the wrong name up or the wrong picture, I believe, up for him in the starting lineups, and he turned that into motivation, and it just became this very FU mentality, and it showed up on the court. So I think he can do that. I think that's within him. I would say we saw that last postseason, frankly, too, where how could you not rise to that occasion? I think the Suns punched above their weight to beat that Clippers team and to push Denver as much as they did, frankly, given the bench they had and Chris Paul being, a lesser version of himself by that point. He really was giving every single ounce of energy. He was at the absolute peak of his powers. He was, emotional and really, really just bringing it. And that's where I think his leadership can show up. Of course there's a reason that happened in a 64 game season, or in a deep second round postseason push. It's easier to do that when you're winning. Nobody's gonna bring the fire of 1,000 suns to a 15-point loss in January, but you kind of got to try if you're the best player. You got to manufacture that and try to bring it out of your teammates, even if it's uncomfortable or a little made up, a little faked. So maybe he's not going to be the pregame speech guy or the take everybody to dinner guy or the, have a one-on-one little heart-to-heart with the eighth man after a practice. And not everybody does things that way, but he has everybody's respect. We know that. And he can be look how much fun I'm having. Look how competitive I'm being. Look how much we're winning. Come with me. He can be that. He has been that. He's willing to be the public face of the team and say difficult things. I think you'd like to see that continue to develop. So it's there for him. I'm not putting it all on him. I think it'd be nice if they brought back a Crowder, JaVale McGee, even E'Twaun Moore from the final season. Those vets did make a difference for him. Tyson Chandler once upon a time. PJ Tucker. For Booker personally, those two had an impact. It'd be nice to have another one of those here. Gordon wasn't that. But part of why, again, I'm putting this on Book a little bit is he's proven that he's up for it. He's proven he's up for the on-court stuff. He's proven he's up for the off-the-court stuff. It's not going to be enough to be productive and efficient and awesome and make All-NBA anymore. He's kind of going to have to... He's going to have to be one of the 5 to 8 best players in the NBA. More often than not, for this thing to get back on track and get that elusive first championship. That'll wrap us up. More to come Tuesday with Brandon Duenas. Hit follow or subscribe if you have not already to get that episode and more throughout the weeks and months ahead. Enjoy your Monday. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.